as the world wants to think that it is a conflict of religions between Muslims, between Islam and Judaism, between Muslims and Jews. And so they conflate, they think that Judaism and Zionism is one and the same. And therefore, if you're opposed to the state of Israel, it's because you're opposed to Judaism and the Jewish people. And consequently, that means that you are anti-Semitic. Of course, we're not going to get into the semantics that Semite is an Arab and Muslim also, of course. But in truth, this narrative is totally false. It's corrupt. It's wrong. It's criminal.
Good evening, Rabbi. This is IAIS Malaysia. We are very happy to have you on the show. Today we are going to discuss, of course, the most important issue on the world stage now is the Palestinian issue. We've been following your talks, and we find that the issue at hand is due to the fact that the regime occupying Palestine is now the main problem to resolving what is happening at the moment. There is this slogan which we always hear: from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I think your organization is dedicated to explaining to the community, especially the world community, about the difference between Judaism and Zionism. And because that is the main reason why we have this problem at the moment. Can you please elaborate on this topic?
So first, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so, inshallah, sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. I mean, it's an honor and privilege of being on your show, and then in this manner, we hope to educate, to clarify to the world just this issue exactly was what you are asking. It's a terrible tragedy that the world seems to confuse what the conflict is here, what this terrible Nakba, what the Arab call the Nakba, the tragedy. This
75 years.
Yes, 76 now, unfortunately.
76.
As the world wants to think that it is a conflict of religions between Muslims, between Islam and Judaism, between Muslims and Jews. And so they conflate, they think that Judaism and Zionism is one and the same. And therefore, if you're opposed to the state of Israel, it's because you're opposed to Judaism and the Jewish people. And consequently, that means that you are anti-Semitic. Of course, we're not going to get into the semantics that Semite is an Arab and Muslim also, of course. But in truth, this narrative is totally false. It's corrupt. It's wrong. It's criminal, because Judaism is a religion of 3,000 years to be subservient to God. It has no aspiration now to take over, to go and create a state, a national home. While on the converse, Zionism is a nationalist movement that started 100-odd years ago, 140, one of those in that time period. That a movement of people who are mainly not religious, anti-religious, and they decided they want a national home, and they decided that in order to give it legitimacy, in order to get backing, support, sympathy from the world, they're going to call it Israel, the state of Israel. and they're going to make it in Palestine. They were actually thinking originally to make it in other countries that would be more productive, that would have a rich, lush lands, as in Uganda, Patagonia, next to Argentina. But then they decided, in order for practical purposes, they'll make it in Palestine, and they'll be able to say to the world, they use the Star of David, they'll say to the world, this is what God gave to us, it's ours. And they use the Bibles, they use the religion. Even though these people were anti-religious, they hated God, they hated the religion, they were, this is a nationalist movement, but they don't have the morals of the Torah of God because they're estranged from God. So therefore, they without any compunctions, without any qualms, they use the name Israel, and they use the name, the Star of David, and they say to the world, this is a Jewish state. Now, at the time, all the rabbinical authorities, and we put out a book, we published a book called The Jews, the rabbis speak out, the 130-year record of religious Jewish opposition to Zionism, and in which we have the rabbinical authorities. There's tens of thousands of rabbis, but these are the leading rabbinical authorities from around the world, that each one in their manner, in their style, spoke out against this concept of nationalism, of creating a state. Again, Judaism is subservience to God. 3,000 years of a covenant we made with God. Zionism is a nationalism, a movement that started 100-odd years ago, a total transformation to something entirely different. And that's Judaism. Also, you have to understand, besides the whole concept of this nationalism, that it's not this meaning of serving God, being subservient to God, keeping the laws of the Torah that God gave us, kosher, Sabbath, not to kill, not to steal, and to be kind and do everything that the Torah. And Zionism is not that. It's a basic material concept, but it's forbidden. The Torah expressly, God expressly warned the Jews that we are forbidden, since 2,000 years already, we are forbidden to reinstate, to reestablish any Jewish sovereignty. Now, what is that? Because when God gave us the Torah 3,000 years ago, it was God took us out of Egypt, and we were stood on Mount Sinai. The Almighty spoke to Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, gave him the Torah, and he required of us to go into the Holy Land. But he stipulated that we should not make any, that we have to be in a high level of holiness in order to remain there. And if we're not on that level, in the Torah, it says quite many times in the Torah, then God stipulated we would be rejected from the land. And the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, they warned the Jews many times that we're not on that special high level required as a nation to be. And therefore, it happened what God forewarned, and there was the destruction of the temples. That was there. King Solomon built a temple, and the Jews were sent into exile 2,000 years ago. So in other words, we're talking about 3,000 years ago we made the covenant. 1,000-year period later, we were sent into exile, dispersed amongst the world nations, from Babylon and then in Germany, whatever, many. And when the Jews were dispersed in these lands, we were put under oath by God, that 3 oaths. One, that we are not to return en masse, in large numbers. We are not to return, because it's a decree of exile by God. So we're forbidden to return, to gather in the people, so to say, and come back and return to the Holy Land and reestablish any sovereignty. Even if the Holy Land would have been uninhabited, nobody living there, we as Jews are forbidden, and we as Jews who are practicing Jews would stand in opposition to this concept of establishing a Jewish state. It's not permitted. It's the decree of exile. Where does this say? In King Solomon, who built the temple, wrote a book of prophecies called Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, where he wrote these 3 oaths, that the Jews are on the oath not to return. And secondly, the second oath is we're not to rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens wherever a Jew resides. If a Jew would be living in this beautiful country of Malaysia, and then we'd have to be loyal citizens, pray for the well-being of the country. I'm an American citizen. I have to pray for the well-being of the United States, and pay taxes and so forth and so on. Same thing, an Iranian Jew or Canadian Jew, whatever, we have to be loyal citizens. To go and rebel against the world nations, against the people in Palestine that were living there, a group of Jews to go and rebel and decide they're going to make a state, so that they're breaching the oath of exile, it's called. So to call in masses of Jews, to gather in people to go to return there, is a breach of one oath. To rebel against the people that are living there is breaching the second oath. And the third oath is that we're not made to make any attempt to end exile. And of course, they call themselves Eschalta de Geula, beginning of redemption. That's how the Zionists call themselves. So they, in one fell swoop, they're breaching all the oaths of exile. Besides that, the whole concept is nationalism, is not Judaism. But what in their actions, when they created the state, they went against all what God commanded of us. And of course, on top of that, they did it against the people that were living there, and therefore you're breaching all the laws of the Torah, that you're not allowed to kill or steal and so forth. Just to add icing to the cake, they're doing it to a people that were kind to the Jews. The Jewish people were living together in Palestine, in Al-Quds, in Jerusalem, for hundreds of years in peace and harmony, as they were living in every other Muslim country, and in the Middle East there, they were living in Iraq.
But these Jews were already there in the Holy Land. The Zionists came from outside.
Exactly. So that's what we're saying, that the Jews were actually living together with a distinctly different religion. We were taken in, embraced, because the Jews were actually, they were being harassed in Europe, they were murdered. There was the Inquisition, there were crusades throughout history. And the Muslim lands, by the Christians, they wanted them to convert them forcefully to Christianity. And the Muslim people took them in, and we were able to flourish as great scholars and communities. So to go now and to usurp and to take the land away from the people of Palestine,
protected you
and protected us. So you're not allowed to kill, you're not allowed to steal, you're not allowed to have a Jewish state. And then and on top of that, we are required to show gratitude that good is done to us. And here, instead of gratitude, they're telling the world, oh, these people are vile, evil, they hate the Jews, and therefore we have a right to, they're only they dehumanize the people of Palestine. So in every aspect, Zionism is antithetical, that is contradictory to Judaism. Judaism and Zionism is two diametric opposites. It's unacceptable. And the Jewish rabbis, as I said, they all stood in opposition. As I quote one great rabbi who's a codifier of Jewish law, his name was the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Yisroel Meir HaKohen. He passed away in 1933. 15 years before the state was established.
Yes.
And he wrote, and it was, everybody accepts him. Anybody who's a religious Jew accepts his writings. And he writes, the Zionists, he spoke, he said, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. And that's his student quoted him as this, Omer Ani Masel Melech. That the Zionists are dead limbs of Judaism, basically, of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. Because the concept, it eats away at Judaism, is that we have to be be subservient to God, follow His laws. And Zionism says, no, God, where is God to protect us? It's rooted in blasphemy. You ask a Zionist, they say, we need a land to protect us. We need a land. And so for us, as a religious Jew, we'll say to them, hey, stop. What are you doing? We're not allowed. So they scorn and they laugh at us and they say, where was God to protect you by the Inquisition? Where was God to? So they spew blasphemy. They're rooted in blasphemy. They're rooted in rebellion against God. It is just as day and night is the opposite.
You were saying they are not religious.
So and how do they do this? And the world, they turn to the world and they say, we represent Judaism. And they made a rabbinate to show that, while the true rabbis who were living, representing the people, like you said, that were living there for hundreds of years, they pleaded with the United Nations. In 1947, the chief rabbi of Palestine, nothing to do with the Israeli rabbinate. That's a farce. It's just just like they use the Star of David, they make a rabbinate. But the chief rabbi of Palestine, his name was Rabbi Dushinsky, of blessed memory, and he pleaded with the United Nations. It's in documents of the United Nations. In July 1947. The state was ratified by the United Nations in 1948. And he said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. The Jewish leader says, we don't want this state. And that was the opinion of Judaism and the Jewish community. And after he passed on, there was another chief rabbi, another one. Then in 1902, we took up another chief rabbi. You could see tens of thousands of Jews in the streets of Jerusalem going out to accept the chief rabbi. And conversely, when Netanyahu went to visit, this is when he's going to visit President Obama, then we had tens of thousands of Jews going to Washington, D.C. These are from the United States Jews. And they say, Bibi Netanyahu and the state of Israel does not represent world Jewry. Israel has no right to rule over any part of the Holy Land. And now he's coming tomorrow. He's going to be. He's going to.
Are you going to
he's-
have?
We're going to have tremendously large demonstration in Washington D.C. Don't worry, New York Times and the Washington Post, none of these will cover it. You won't know that there was such a thing happening. Oh, they'll have pictures of him and they'll describe how hunky dory it's a Jewish state and everybody's happy, but they won't speak that much. I don't even think of unfortunately of the genocide, the terrible suffering of the people of Palestine. They cover it peripherally, but nothing what is absolutely required.
So when you, we know your position about this Zionism, the state of Israel, which is now there. Of course, the problem has been persisting for more than 75 years, as we were just discussing.
Right.
Now, and there doesn't seem to be any solution, except that you should go back to the status quo ante, meaning 1948 or something like that. How do you foresee a solution to this problem now?
So, with the help of the Almighty, let's again 76 years, because we're living and breathing this terrible Nakba. So it's 76 years happened in May was the 76 years,
Yes.
and it's actually since the Balfour Declaration, which was
1917.
Yes,
1917. Yeah.
1917, like 170. So since then, which sort of they started started to insidiously coming into the land, first buying some land and then forcefully taking over land. So it started again like over 100 years, 107 years. The world keeps on talking about two-state and things like that. But we understand this is very simple. You can't steal a land from a people. You can't steal half a house from a people either. Not.
Yeah.
And we people, it's simply criminal. But we say it's against God. It's against the Torah. So even when they were, for instance, when they wanted to make they made the Oslo Accords. So our rabbis, including we had a rabbi his name was Rabbi Hirsch. Or Moshe Hirsch, of blessed memory. He was the representative in the Palestinian Authority. He was from the Jewish community living in Al-Quds in Jerusalem. The Zionists poured acid in his face, by the way, and they blinded him in one eye, and he was barely able to see from the other. But he was a representative of the Jews in at that time in Palestine, from the religious Jewish communities in the Palestinian Authority. I mean, they're always busy. 76 years that they brutally beat the Zionists, Jewish people, young children, old men, assassinate our rabbis. This is ongoing. This is happening. So basically, this is what, and it would be. I'm getting a little off the subject, but this would be a scandal if it would happen in the United States. A scandal beyond words. Netanyahu would be running there and demanding reparations and demanding, that everybody's anti-Semitic and pay the state of Israel something for that. But this is what they themselves perpetrate day and night for 76 years. But basically, our rabbis, Rabbi Moshe Hirsch, then went to Madrid, and I was in Washington D.C. And we stood in front when they were having these discussions about making the two-state solution. And we stated that we're not naysayers. We want peace. We're very thankful if there would be peace. And we're tremendously happy for every inch that's returned to the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
At the same time, in the Torah, it says, why are you rebelling against me? It will not be successful. We said, we are certain this part that you want to give for that should be called Israel, that should be under Israeli control, under Zionist control, that cannot be, because it's against God, and you can't steal, you can't kill, you can't have a Jewish state. There will never be a true peace. So we stood up and demonstrated at the time, and unfortunately, of course, we were proven right that you have not 10 years doesn't go by that you don't have a major upheaval, war, and of course for the Palestinian people, it's a continuous oppression. And people are suffering, and we are finding now it's culminated in what's happening in Gaza. The tremendous, the beyond words, the satanic suffering that we're finding,
Genocide.
and the world is watching, and somehow they're complacent. They're standing and watching now. I'm here in Malaysia, where you have you had the leadership here. That we were supposed to. We had a conference when was supposed to be led by I forget the name of the conference, but Mahathir, Dr. Mahathir was leaving with the conference. Oh, I'm sorry, it was 3 groups. One of them is Global Peace Foundation. Pradhan, I forgot the other 2 names of the 2 groups.
Yes,
Forgive me,
yes,
but it was 3 groups that were having this conference. With Dr. Mahathir leading it, and unfortunately, he's sick, and we all hope and pray that God should send him a speedy recovery, because he has been standing in the forefront. I remember many years ago, I think it's over 16 years ago, when he spoke at the United Nations, and it turned the United Nations over on its head, where he spoke clearly. He understood clearly that this is not a religious conflict. It's nothing to do. It's not a conflict between Jews and Muslims. It's and like, in other words, he caught him at that game. He said this is nothing to do with religion. It's to do with an unacceptable, an illegal criminal occupation. And he said we cannot be silent. And he's been standing at the forefront of opposing this occupation. And so therefore, the concept of allowing a part of it to be controlled by Israel. First of all, the people of Palestine will never accept it. The ones who are living in that half of the country of Palestine, why should they lose their homes and so forth? And we as Jews say, why should this be you're rebelling against God? You can't kill and steal, and you can't do it. So it won't be a successful thing. What the solution is, like you mentioned, we have a history. Hundreds of years we lived together in peace.
Yes.
Jews and Muslims lived together. There was no human rights groups to protect. We were coexisting. We lived in the same courtyards. We babysat each other's children. So even though we have a distinctly different religion, it's not an impediment to coexistence. Or what changed? What caused now there's so much this suffering, this mass, the murder, what's happening? It's because they implemented the Zionism, and in other words, an interlop, a foreign people moved in to this beautiful fabric that was the Holy Land, Palestine, where there was the largest community were Muslim.
Yes.
The second largest was Christian, and then there was a Jewish community, and they were living together. And all of a sudden, these interlopers, people came from outside. They got permission first from Britain, and then from the United Nations, that they should be able to have rule over there. And since then, you have death and suffering. So what, if you ask any logical person, anybody with common sense, is this a concept of an anti-Semitic, something people hate the Jews? Or is it a concept of a religious conflict? No. It's people don't want to be occupied. It's simple.
Yes, simple.
It's simple. And it's an insult to the human common sense when you keep on insisting that it's anti-Semitism. You know what is anti-Semitism? The Zionist state of Israel. They cause hate. They cause mistrust, bad feelings between Jews and Muslims. And they make cheap the word anti-Semitism when they accuse people of being anti-Semitic. Why do they make it cheap? Because my grandparents died in Auschwitz. The majority of my family, my father escaped when the Nazis came to Hungary. And all our communities died. And the Nazis were anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, when you're going to say to people who are standing up against criminals who are oppressing and are stealing the land, and you say, hey, you're anti-Semitic, they're making cheap that word anti-Semitic. And they're causing an exacerbation of anti-Semitism because people are angry at Jews because they don't know to differentiate. Because the Zionists use the Star of David, they use the name Israel, they call it a Jewish state, and they're making laws and in around the world that if you speak up against Zionism, you're against the Jews, you're anti-Semitic.
Yeah. Recently, the United Nations. The ICJ, the International Court of Justice, made a decision that the occupation was illegal, that the settlements will have to go and you have to return. So, what is your take on this? Now that it is confirming something which, what we are discussing about, that no matter how the Israeli regime tries to describe the situation, the fact of the matter is it is illegal and they have to go. It is an occupation.
It is. And ironically, of course, Israel accuses them of being anti-Semitic. And then, as you know, and the Secretary General of the United Nations, they said he should he should be fired or resign because he's anti-Semitic.
Or maybe he's involved with Hamas or something.
It's just so deplorable and unacceptable. But the hurt, it's a Nakba, but it's for us as a Jew, it's a double Nakba, because we cry and hurt and watch and are frustrated what's happening to the people of Gaza, what's happening to the people of Palestine. But we know that the world is watching and saying, it's a Jewish issue. It's a Jewish issue. It's being done in our name, and we go to so many demonstrations. We speak out around the world. Our community lives near the United Nations. The second largest Jewish community, besides from Jerusalem, is in New York. It's right across this Brooklyn, New York. It's right across the United Nations. It's in Manhattan. It's like an island. There's a Williamsburg Bridge that connects it. Right over there in Williamsburg is the largest concentration of religious Jews. There's not one Israeli flag there. And we are always demonstrating, we're outspoken, and we cry, and we plead with the world leaders, just like you would respect in Christianity, you would respect the opinions of the Christian leaders, and in Islam you would respect the voice of the imams. Why not in Judaism? Why are you ignoring the voice of the original Jewish community that is in Palestine? Why are you ignoring the voices of the distinguished rabbis of the very religious community that are saying this is unacceptable? You cannot, and people say, they have rabbis, chief rabbi. It's the extreme right. It's the religious ones that are supporting it in Israel. Of course, it's the religious, it's the Mizrahi. It's called what they call a modern religious. It's a euphemism for a compromised religion. It's the settlers. It's these, not the very religious communities that are around the world in the hundreds of thousands. They refuse to even accept the legitimacy of the existence of the state, let alone what they're doing in Gaza. And so these Jews are there, and we agree with the court, the international court. But they're getting away with murder. Basically, they're getting away with murder. So we dare not be silent. And we were hoping former Prime Minister Matir would be Dr. Matir would be the first, will become, I know he's getting on with age, but God should give him strength and power. He should be out there, we hope to lead the charge, to lead that we should continue to get the world to stop cowering, to stop being intimidated by the Zionists' claim that the Palestinians are simply anti-Semitic. They should stop falling into the net of the Zionist narrative and their propaganda, and they should do what's right. We find, thank God, in the United States and in Europe, they have in many of the campuses that they're standing up to students and to professors. And mind you, there's many thousands and thousands of Jews, and a lot of them that are leading these movements. And they're out there. And yet, by the way, they're losing the tenure. The professors, the students are getting fired. They're getting thrown out of the schools. And
but I think you cannot stop this move.
Exactly.
This is a wave. Now I think
hope you're right.
Cannot,
with God's help.
You cannot. You see, a lie remains a lie forever. You cannot cover it by any other means.
Right.
So the truth will eventually prevail.
We hope that God's help that
so I think
right now.
With what you see now, especially in the United States, recently with the students, coming out and having the encampments and supporting the Palestinians, against the slaughter, the genocide, and calling upon their campuses as well as the US to divest from Israel or any Israeli interest. So this kind of movement will eventually, I think, it will
prevail, accomplish.
It'll come to a certain point where I doubt that the regime will be able to maintain what it is trying to do. But I would like to bring.
I would just like to buttress what you were saying about this is when South Africa was recognized by the United Nations. They were given full respect, a full right, and they were called their ambassador, His Excellency, and so forth. And the ones who stood in opposition were called terrorists. Nelson Mandela.
Apartheid.
Against apartheid, and they were practicing apartheid, but yet it was the official position of South Africa, and yet they were a member state of the United Nations, going on their way for tens of years. And President Nelson Mandela, at that time he was just Nelson Mandela, was in 27 years in prison. Imagine that. So and what stopped that? Everything is God ultimately, and we pray to God He should bring an end of this with His compassion, and everything ultimately is in His hands. But through the human angle of it that God made, it was the grassroots, the students and people stood up and they were pestered and made uncomfortable their politicians. That the politicians went on their merry way, and they were very happy with the status quo and everything, but the young people, the students, and so on, and they kept on doing it till it was untenable, and that is when eventually they stopped. And today nobody would accept apartheid, right? Anybody would say apartheid. If somebody would want to create a country with apartheid, it would be unacceptable, and everybody understands it's totally evil. The same thing is with Israel. They're going on for tens of years, accepted and created, ratified by the United Nations, even though it's 100% evil, 100% wrong, just like every child understands to discriminate, to have racism against blacks. It's 100% wrong. It doesn't make sense. It's an insult to human intelligence, to human decency. This is the same thing with Israel. And it's an insult to Judaism. It's an insult to our religion. It's an affront to our religion and to all humanity. And yet the world is silent. But we're having, like you say, now we're seeing just what happened in South Africa, that the movement of the young generation and the students and people who maybe not obliged because of financial reasons and stuff. So maybe that's why, and it's moving. So maybe with God's help, this will be the opening door. And we need like a leadership like in Malaysia who's not afraid to be outspoken about the suffering of the people of Palestine. Maybe we will have this with God's help, inshallah, the beginning and a speedy, a free Palestine, and God should help immediate, of course, ceasefire, but
course,
free Palestine.
We are people of hope. You are thinking that way, and we are also thinking in the same way that with what is happening after the October 7 incident last year, and until now, the genocide which is going on in Gaza, which has martyred so many, close to 40,000 people. Now, of course, this is not just simply going to disappear and become and be forgotten. Definitely, I mean, this has already created a momentum among the people of the world. Everywhere, people know what Israel stands for. I think there's a kind of Israel is isolating itself. But I'd like to bring you to another issue now. Uh, I don't think Israel is a safe place now anymore, because with what's happening in the northern border with Hezbollah, and with also the Houthis coming in and things like this. Uh, well, it's only going to expand the conflict, and with so much of tension, and it's no more a safe place, because they
never been a
promised
safe
it's
place.
never been. But that is what I think they promised when they wanted the settlers to
Right.
come in. But now it's no more a safe place. What do you think about that?
Well, first, you should just know, when you're talking, you remind me about that fact that, just the many, as I explained, that it's constantly breaching the laws of the Torah and something. Another issue was that they constantly tried to take cannon fodder for themselves. They would take people from who suffered in different lands right after World War II, and they dragged them, they took them up to Palestine. Or I personally was involved with the Jews of Yemen, and that they kept on trying to put pressure on the governments that they should send the Jews, take out the Jews, and they promised them that they'll be settled in Jerusalem amongst the God-fearing, because it was a God-fearing community amongst the God-fearing Jews, because these were not Zionists. And what they did was they were helpless, and the Zionists, the Yemenite Jews were helpless, and they were gullible, and they would take them and they would take them up to Palestine, and they would put them out, and they would take away the passports, of course, and everything, and put them out in the settlements that should have cannon fodder over there. And these people would ask, "What are you doing?" They were like prisoners. And that's what they did with many, many people of Morocco, of Yemen, and we pleaded with the Jews in Yemen that be careful, don't be fooled by these Zionists. That's what they were doing for many. Not only that, they were caught putting bombs in synagogues in Iraq. There's a book called Ben Gurion's Scandals. Somebody Galad, I believe his name is, but the book is called Ben Gurion's Scandals, where I personally interviewed him. He was in the time in the 50s or whatever. He was in Iraq in the Jewish community, and he was a youth, or always a rebellious youth, and he became a Zionist. In the 50s, and his father said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he's the group of Zionists. They were caught putting bombs in the synagogue in order to create panic that the Jews should run away and go up to Palestine. He later had misgivings, and they were caught, by the way. So it was a scandal. It was proven, but he really became totally disenchanted, and he wrote a book about what they would have been Ben-Gurion scandals, about all these things. So this is what they would do. They would take people and put them in the settlements and everything, and all simply because they wanted to build their Zionism, their control. And most of the people, they use fear mongering. Many people, and they're not Zionists even. First of all, we have many people like us around the world who are anti-Zionist, and we would be out there in the tens and hundreds of thousands constantly if it wouldn't be for the fear of the attacks, the vicious attacks of Zionists. Last week, we had a demonstration in New York. I came back to my car, the glass was smashed, my windows, the tires slashed, and with electronic windows and all this was a fortune to replace. This
was done by the.
Yeah, I have pictures of it on our site. You can see in nkusa.org. This is and they do this constantly, and they have death threats. So many people are fearful to speak up, even though they're anti-Zionist, or else you would see much more of a voice. And then there are others, they use fear mongering because they're not slouches. We can't accuse them of being lazy. So they use the expensive PR firms, and they go out and they tell Jews that, the Palestinians want to kill you. And they use fear mongering and things like that. So people are afraid, and they say, what can we do? So and I'm not condoning the people who are standing there quietly or supporting them, but a lot of it has to do because of the Zionist propaganda. To the world, they scream anti-Semitism, that the Palestinians, and to the Jewish people, they say, you better be careful. You just lived through the Nazis. These are connected with the Nazis, a continuation of the Nazis. So they use all these ways of intimidating, of silencing, of getting support from people, and they have the settlements. They put them in the settlements, and so around around Israel, which is occupied Palestine. The very core of the religious communities will never buy into that. We never go to their army to serve. We have people that get arrested. You can see that
going into
because they refuse. Boys and girls who turn 17, it's mandatory service in the army, and they refuse to go, so they get arrested. And as you maybe even heard, there's a lot of demonstrations. We just had last week 100,000 people or more demonstrating in the cities of Jerusalem because they're trying to force the religious to go into the army. Now they're even embarrassed. They don't say why they don't want to go to the army. They say, oh, because they don't want to serve, because they want to just learn. They don't want to serve because they're against your state, and even they had signs. We want to be with the other side. We don't want to be with you. You know that because we're against the state. So of course it's not safe there. It's not safe because God says, "Why are you rebelling against me?" It will not be successful. It's not safe because you can't steal and kill with impunity. There is an Almighty on this world. So what they're doing is criminal, and therefore it's not safe. It's not safe anywhere in that land. And to the world, of course, they say, this is our insurance policy. What does that mean, insurance policy, when you create a state by stealing and in an area that all the neighbors are not sympathetic to you? Yeah. And then you expect, and then you say the Jews should come and support you. When we're living in countries that thank God, that we're able to live and normal lives, and you're putting people in a position that they're afraid of a suicide bomb, or what kind of ridiculous insurance policy are you making? But we don't want to, of course, to condone a suicide bomb in any manner or something. I'm saying it flies in the face of logic. And of course, now, like you say, you see with your eyes what God warned us, that you shouldn't make a state. This is what will be the result. That you're saying, like you say, they can't live in all the bordering of the land. But like I say, it's without that we know it's unsafe because it's against God, and because you're not allowed to have a state altogether.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But the thing is, to get this idea, but this comes from your religion itself, that you are not allowed to have a state there.
Anywhere, actually.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
And also, of course, as it is now. But then the Zionist narrative seems to be more prominent, and you find that the Western countries, mainly, including the US, supporting that, of course, the right of Israel to exist. And if anyone talks about it is wrong, but that's what you have been alluding to. You're saying that under the Jewish religion says no state.
Right.
But then the state is there, and it is being supported by these world powers.
Yeah.
So that is where I think the problem is. If they were genuinely falling back on religion, let's say even the other countries, okay, why can't they get the truth from the religious personalities of the real from your religious groups to the authentic teachings of Judaism with regards to having a state or otherwise is decided by the religious authority in Judaism. So once, if that can be done, do you think it might bring some change in this narrative?
Eventually, it definitely will happen. As I said in the Torah, it's clear the state will end, totally end. There will be an end of the occupation. And then people will, of course, realize that they were being duped, that Judaism is one thing only. It's the subservience to God, to serve God. and that we do not occupy, and the Palestinian people, with God's help, inshallah, that we'll be living again together. It will happen.
Yeah.
But until that day comes, we don't know when that will be. We dare not be silent. I mean, we look to God and we pray to God, because ultimately in his hands to bring a end. God help speedily and peacefully. But till that day, we shouldn't be intimidated. Remember that our obligation is not to accomplish. We have to do. God will do the accomplishment.
Yes.
We are required to do what is in our power. God gifted us to speak up and explain exactly like you're saying, that they should turn to the religious leaders. If you're looking at Judaism and Islam, look at what they're saying. And they'll tell you we can live together. And they'll show you examples how we always live together. So this is what will eventually happen. And once that happens, you see, I don't know how the sea change will happen. But when the world will start, like you say, it's starting to move, then all of a sudden people will say, wow, like in South Africa, they said it's impossible to change because there'll be murder in the streets because of the oppression of the apartheid, and you couldn't bring that. But when that happened, you turn back and you say it was able to be done. The same thing is here. When that day will come, when the world will realize the injustice, the criminality of this occupation, and then they'll step back and they'll stop supporting it. Immediately, they'll find the solution that we can live together. There'll be people who were criminals, the ones who perpetrated, who tortured people, who were in the prison camps of the Israeli prison camps. These people, besides the justice that they'll have to come to in courts, but they will have, let's say they'll feel uncomfortable, they'll have to move to the United States, to Canada. So let's say it'll cost thousands of people, which cost a few $1 billion to settle them in other places. But the main the Jews and Muslims will be able to live together because there's no impediment of religion to live together, and they want to, and the mainstream people want to live in peace. You'll ask anybody, a normal, a Jewish person, a normal Arab person, the Jews will say that the Arabs want to kill them, but a lot of them, unfortunately, they're not knowledgeable from that. But if you take away that false Zionist, vile narrative, they want to live together. They want peace. People are tired of war. They're tired of it. And it will happen eventually. And people will turn around and say, we are worried. Why did we wait so long? And the politicians will be embarrassed to look at their grandchildren that they were quiet in this today when we're watching day in and day out the murder of people that they had the power to do something about. We hope God will help that they'll do what they're supposed to do. God gifted them with this lofty positions, that they'll use it properly and bring an immediate cessation of the death and suffering in Gaza and the whole of Palestine, and a free Palestine from the river to the sea.
Yes, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And I think we have come to the end of the show, more or less. And I think, like you were saying, I would like to just give some kind of hope, because we find that lately even countries like Spain, Ireland have recognized Palestine. And this, as more, and there are just a few countries which have not recognized yet.
Exactly.
And,
the
but
vast
I think
majority did.
Most of the countries have already accepted Palestine, and with that, I think what you're hoping for and what we are also hoping for will come to fruition. Palestine will be free. That is, with that, inshallah, we hope. And we have come to the end of our session. Thank you very much, Rabbi Weiss, for your time and for your very enlightening ideas. And of course, your struggle to enlighten the people about what Judaism is really about, so that we are able to, know the criminality of the Israeli regime. So thank you once again. We hope we will have you again in sometime in the future at our in IAIS. And we come to the end of the show. Thank you very much. Till we meet again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.